I'm Philip Ryan, the political editor here at the Irish Independent, and I'm joined by Hugh O'Connell, the deputy political editor at the Irish Independent too. And we are going to talk about Robert Watt, who has been in the news again this week for his latest contract, one of many. So just give us a brief little history of who Robert Watt is, and then we can jump into why is he in the news again?
So he's the Secretary General of the Department of Health. He's paid more than any civil servant in the history of the state, nearly €300,000 a year. And the reason he's there is because he's very highly rated within government. But he is a controversial figure. He was the first Secretary General of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. He's frequently clashed with ministers over the years. We know, for example, he was opposed to the National Broadband Plan, which the last government pushed ahead with. And we know as well, for example, that in 2021, he had a row in a pub with Darragh O'Brien, the housing minister, over the whole controversy around his salary. So he's a robust, aggressive character. He frequently appears before Oireachtas committees and adopts a tone with politicians that we're not used to seeing from civil service officials.
So in this issue, why is he now at the centre of this controversy about Tony Houlihan's botched appointment to Trinity College?
Yeah, so last year there was a tentative plan in place for Tony Houlihan to leave the Department of Health, to leave his role as the Chief Medical Officer after the pandemic had more or less ended, or the emergency phase of the pandemic had ended, and move into academia. So there was a plan for him to go to Trinity College Dublin, to be the Professor of Public Health Leadership and do more work on preparing Ireland for the next pandemic research and that kind of stuff. So Robert Watt tried to organise this for Tony Houlihan. There would be research funding behind it of up to €2 million a year, and the state would effectively continue to pay Tony Houlihan while he worked in a third level institution.
Sounds like a great idea.
Sounds like a great idea. I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't be in favour of something like that, given Tony Houlihan was at the coalface of the pandemic response for 2 years. He has the expertise. This is a good idea to get this done.
But the problem was the politicians knew very little to nothing about this.
Well, this is the thing. And so no one seems to have been told about this who needed to be told about this. The Taoiseach's Chief of Staff didn't know the details. The Secretary General of the Department of the Taoiseach at the time, Martin Fraser, he doesn't seem to, or he says he wasn't across the detail. Robert Watt argues that he was. So that and Stephen Donnelly, the minister in the middle of all this, doesn't seem to have known a huge amount about it either. So the controversy over this resulted in Tony Houlihan saying, well, you know, I'm not arsed with this anymore, and he decided to retire from the civil service.
So we move on. Reports are drafted. Reports are commented on, back and forth between everybody involved. Report is finally published, and Watt goes before the Oireachtas Committee on Finance to answer questions about the entire debacle.
This is the independent review by Maura Quinn, commissioned by Stephen Donnelly. It's published. It reveals this dispute between Robert Watt and.
But we jump into the committee there this week.
Chief of Staff. Yeah, in the committee, then Robert Watt makes very clear that he disagrees with this report, its conclusions and its findings. That basically all accepted protocols were bypassed in trying to arrange this deal for Tony Houlihan, and that Tony Houlihan's personal involvement in it wasn't necessarily appropriate. Robert Watt says, he rejects the report almost entirely. He has a very aggressive back and forth with various TDs on the committee, Pierce Doherty, Rose Conway-Walsh, John McGuinness, the committee chair, who says he's arrogantly dismissive. And his whole attitude rubs TDs up the wrong way. And it's the sort of performance from Robert Watt I think that we've seen before from him, but it's so unique for a civil servant to behave in this manner towards politicians. It's almost, they have contempt for him, he has mutual contempt for them, and it's all on show. It's very unsavoury. And the problem for the government is that this is all added fuel to the fire. The government want this controversy to go away. Tony Houlihan is no longer involved
but that's
in the public service.
It is done and dusted. The report is out there. Houlihan's gone. Everybody else is staying in place. Martin Fraser, let's not forget, who was centrally involved in at the time as the Department of Taoiseach Secretary General. He's got his new plush gig over in London as an ambassador. So it all should be over. It shouldn't be really talked about. The report came out. There's a bit of back and forth. But like we were saying, it's all about Robert yet again.
Robert Watt's appearance at the committee this week has added fuel to the fire. The committee now says that they want to bring in Maura Quinn, who did the report. They might even want to bring in Tony Houlihan. They might want to bring in Martin Fraser. They might want to bring in Stephen Donnelly. And all of this is going to keep it running and running and running. And that's not a good position for the government to be in, because this is a whole botched secondment that went so wrong, they'd rather it just go away. But it's going to trundle on. And meanwhile, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from Robert Watt and a lot more about Robert Watt. and that's not for any government, for any elected government, for a civil servant to take on the power and I suppose the prominence that he has is not a good position for them to be in, because it leaves the public asking who's in charge.